They say that from the outside looking in, everyone else's life looks picture perfect. We scroll through social media, see the smiling family portraits, the anniversaries with expensive flowers, the vacations where love seems to drip from every photograph, and we start to believe that perfection exists. My marriage looked exactly like that, a shimmering, flawless diamond that everyone admired. But what people never realized is that sometimes diamonds are fake, and glass can glitter too. From the very beginning, he had everyone fooled. He was the kind of man who walked into a room and made people turn their heads. Charisma, confidence, that easy smile that made you feel like the most important person in the world when he looked at you. When he proposed, the whole neighborhood whispered about how lucky I was. He's a dream husband, they said. You'll never have to worry about anything. And for a while, I let myself believe it. Our wedding was like a fairy tale. White dress, tears in the crowd. A dance that people said looked like a scene from a movie. For years afterward, friends would still bring it up. You two were made for each other, and I would smile politely, hiding the truth I didn't even want to admit to myself. Because behind that perfect stage performance, cracks were already forming in the foundation. At first, it was small things. A sudden late-night meeting, a canceled dinner, a text message he wouldn't let me see. I told myself it was stress, it was work, it was nothing. After all, isn't marriage about trust? Isn't love about patience? I buried my unease under layers of denial, convincing myself that every relationship has little bumps. But let me tell you something. A woman's intuition is rarely wrong. That gnawing feeling in your gut, that tightening in your chest when something doesn't add up, that's your soul whispering the truth before your mind is ready to hear it. And I felt it. Every day, like a shadow in the room that no one else could see. When we went out together, he was the picture of devotion, pulling out chairs, holding my hand, introducing me proudly as his wife. People would gush, "You're so lucky," and I'd nod, smiling. But deep down, I felt like a performer trapped in a play I hadn't signed up for. I wasn't his partner. I was his alibi, his perfect cover. The worst part wasn't even the lies. It was the way he made me doubt myself. Gaslighting, that subtle twisting of words. When I'd ask why he came home late, he'd chuckle and say, "You're imagining things." If I glanced at his phone, he'd sigh and accuse me of being paranoid. Slowly, without even realizing, I stopped trusting myself. I started to believe that maybe I was too emotional, too insecure, too needy. That's the cruelest thing about betrayal. It doesn't just break your heart, it breaks your sense of reality. And then there was her, my best friend, the one person who knew every secret I had, who held my hand when life got hard, who promised me loyalty like a sister. She was always around, laughing with us at dinner, texting me daily, checking in. Looking back now, it makes me sick how seamlessly she slid into the cracks of my marriage, how she played the role of supportive friend, while secretly weaving herself into the shadows of my husband's life. The irony, I defended her. When people jokingly asked if I wasn't worried about her spending so much time with my husband, I'd laugh. Of course not, I'd say. She's family to me. That's how betrayal works. It's never from a stranger. It's always from the ones who sit closest to your heart. Still, I kept up the act. Smiling at parties, posting happy photos, pretending that my perfect marriage was exactly that, perfect. But at night, when he turned away from me in bed, when his phone buzzed and he hid the screen, when he kissed me absent-mindedly like it was a chore, I felt the truth wrapping itself around me like a cold chain. Do you know what it feels like to live in two worlds at once? In one world, you're the admired wife, the lucky woman, the envy of others. In the other, you're drowning silently, suffocating in lies, afraid to scream because no one would believe you. That was my life. A glossy magazine cover hiding pages full of pain. Here's the most dangerous thing about a perfect marriage that wasn't. It traps you. Because everyone thinks you're living the dream, you feel ashamed to admit you're living a nightmare. You're scared to break the illusion, scared to be judged, scared to lose the one thing you're supposed to hold sacred, your family. So you stay quiet, and your silence becomes the prison where betrayal grows. But silence has a way of transforming into rage, and rage, when carefully nurtured, becomes something far more dangerous than tears. It becomes strategy. Looking back now, I realize that my husband and my so-called best friend made one fatal mistake. They underestimated me. They thought my silence was weakness, my patience was blindness, and my trust was stupidity. They didn't know that silence can be the mask of someone who is waiting, watching, preparing. And so while the world believed we were the golden couple, while my friend smiled in my face as she secretly stole my husband's affection, I was slowly, quietly, collecting every fracture, every shadow, every clue. I wasn't broken, I was sharpening myself. Because the perfect marriage that wasn't became the perfect stage for revenge that they never saw coming. Betrayal never comes from your enemies. It always comes from the hands you thought would never let you fall. And for me, the knife didn't just come from behind. It came from the two people I trusted most in this world. It started like an ordinary evening. He was in the shower humming that same song he always hummed when he thought life was perfect. His phone was buzzing on the nightstand. Normally, I wouldn't have touched it. I respected his privacy. Or maybe I was just too afraid of what I might find. But that night, something inside me shifted. Maybe it was the way my stomach nodded when he came home late with the smell of perfume that wasn't mine. Maybe it was the hollow way he said I love you, like the words were just a habit, not a heartbeat. So I reached for the phone. My hands were trembling, but curiosity overpowered fear. The screen lit up, and there it was, a message that shattered the glass illusion of my so-called perfect marriage. Can't wait to see you again. And the name under it? Not some stranger, not a random coworker, but my best friend, my sister in everything but blood, the woman I trusted with my secrets, my tears, my childhood memories. For a moment I couldn't breathe. My chest tightened like someone was squeezing the air out of me. My brain screamed, this can't be real. It's a misunderstanding. Maybe it's a joke. But the truth was staring me in the face, bright and merciless. I scrolled. More messages, hidden calls, pictures, inside jokes I wasn't part of. Plans for secret meetups. She wasn't just my friend. She was his other woman. The world tilted under me. Do you know that dizzy feeling when the ground feels like it's crumbling beneath your feet? That was me. My hands went cold. My vision blurred. My heart raced so violently I thought it might burst. I wanted to throw the phone, smash it, scream at him through the bathroom door, storm into her house and tear down the mask she wore when she smiled at me. But instead, I froze. Because betrayal doesn't just hurt, it paralyzes. It shatters your sense of reality. It makes you question everything. Every laugh we shared, every I love you, every moment I thought was real. Was it all a lie? And then the memories started to rewind in my mind like a cruel film strip. That time he said he had to work late and she texted me, Let's hang out tomorrow instead. I'm busy tonight. That time she gave me a necklace for my birthday and said she picked it out with someone special, and now I realized it was him. That time she encouraged me to forgive him when he was acting distant. She was protecting him, not me. I felt sick, physically sick. My stomach twisted. My throat burned, and for the first time in years I wished I could erase my entire life and start again. Because the people who were supposed to love me the most had betrayed me the deepest. But betrayal is strange. It can destroy you, yes. But if you sit with it long enough, it can transform into something else. Clarity. When he came out of the shower, towel wrapped around his waist, he smiled at me like nothing had happened. "What's wrong?" he asked when he noticed my pale face. For a moment I almost told him everything. I almost threw the phone at his chest and screamed. But then I saw something in his eyes: confidence, arrogance, the certainty that I would never find out, or worse, that even if I did, I would forgive him because I loved him too much to walk away. And in that moment I decided, no, not this time. That was the night I stopped being the wife who waited patiently at home. That was the night I stopped being the friend who blindly trusted. That was the night I was reborn as something else entirely. A woman who would never again let her kindness be mistaken for weakness. Still, I needed more proof. One text wasn't enough. If I confronted them then and there, they would twist it, deny it, make me the crazy one. So I began my silent investigation. The next few weeks I became an actress, playing the role of the clueless wife, the loyal friend. I smiled when she called, laughed when he kissed my cheek, and nodded when people told me how lucky I was. But behind my smile I was cataloging every lie, every late night, every text notification that lit up his screen. The deeper I dug, the darker the truth became. They weren't just sneaking around, they were planning a future together. Trips, a secret apartment, a life where I no longer existed. My so-called friend was plotting to take my place, and that was when the pain inside me hardened into steel. I realized something important that night. Betrayal is not just an act, it's a declaration. It says you're not enough, you're disposable. And when someone declares that about you, you have two choices: crumble under the weight of their betrayal, or rise and make sure they regret ever underestimating you. I chose the second. So when I say the betrayal I never saw coming, it's true. I never imagined my husband and my best friend would become my enemies. But what they didn't realize is that by betraying me, they gave me the greatest gift, the fire I needed to destroy the illusion of perfection and rewrite the story on my And if they thought they had seen betrayal, they hadn't seen anything yet. Every human heart has a threshold, a point where pain, humiliation, and betrayal no longer just wound you. They awaken something far more dangerous inside you. And I remember the exact moment I reached mine. After finding the messages between my husband and my best friend, my world was a storm I couldn't escape. Days blurred together. I'd lie awake at night staring at the ceiling, listening to the sound of him breathing beside me, wondering how someone could sleep so peacefully after destroying me. My mind played tricks on me. One moment I'd think, maybe I misunderstood, maybe there's an explanation. The next rage would burn through me so violently I wanted to scream until my throat gave out. But I didn't. I stayed quiet. I swallowed every scream, every tear, every ache. And the silence, though it felt like poison at first, slowly became my weapon. The breaking point didn't come in a dramatic explosion. It came quietly, disguised as an ordinary evening. He was sitting across the table from me, scrolling through his phone while I served dinner. He didn't even look up when he said, "Did you add salt?" You always forget. That was it. Not the cheating, not the lies, not even the betrayal of my best friend. My breaking point was a single careless comment, A reminder that he thought so little of me, that I was nothing more than a servant who couldn't even cook properly. And in that moment something inside me snapped. I remember staring at him, the man who had once knelt down with a ring and promised me forever, and realizing forever was a joke. My love had become his safety net, my patience his excuse, my trust his shield. He thought I'd never leave, never fight back, never call him out. He thought my silence meant surrender, but silence can mean something else. Silence can mean calculation. My breaking point was the moment I understood that my tears were wasted. But my strategy would not be, because if I screamed, he would twist it. If I begged, he would mock me. If I left quietly, they would win. No, I couldn't give them that satisfaction. If they wanted betrayal, I would give them a lesson in what betrayal truly costs. From that night forward, I made a choice. I would no longer play the role of the broken wife. I would play the role of the patient hunter. I began observing everything differently. Every lie he told became a piece of evidence. Every smile she gave me became a mask I mentally ripped apart. Every time he walked out the door with work as an excuse, I imagined him walking straight into the trap I was building. But let me tell you something about reaching a breaking point. It's not just about revenge, it's about reclaiming power. Because for weeks, maybe months, I had felt powerless, like I was watching my life burn down around me, and couldn't stop it. But the moment I decided I would no longer be their victim, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Strength. And strength changes everything. I started taking care of myself in ways I hadn't before. Not for him, not to win him back, but because I wanted to remind myself who I was before I was reduced to a prop in his performance. I dressed differently. I walked taller. I stopped seeking his approval. And you know what happened? He noticed. Suddenly, the man who had ignored me for months started asking, "Where are you going? Who are you meeting?" His paranoia grew because he could feel the shift. And my best friend, she noticed too. "You seem different," she said one day, tilting her head, searching my eyes for weakness. But I just smiled, because the truth was, I was different. I wasn't the naive woman she could manipulate anymore. I was the storm they had created. The storm that was coming for them both. The breaking point taught me something crucial. You cannot control what people do to you, but you can control what you do with their betrayal. You can let it destroy you, or you can let it forge you. And I chose the second. I realized I had all the cards. He thought he was clever hiding his affair, but I had the messages, the screenshots, the timelines. She thought she was sneaky slipping into my life, but I knew her patterns, her weaknesses, her secret. They believed they had stripped me of power, but in reality they had handed it to me on a silver platter. And the sweetest part, they had no idea. Because here's the thing about reaching your breaking point. You don't always break loud. Sometimes you break quiet. You break into pieces so sharp that you become unrecognizable, even to the people who thought they knew you best. And those pieces, you learn to use them as weapons. I stopped crying that night, completely. The tears that had soaked my pillow dried up. Instead, my mind sharpened. I started making lists, not just of what they had done, but of what I would do, how I would expose them, how I would reclaim everything they tried to steal from me, how I would make sure they could never forget the day they decided to betray me. And let me tell you, there is nothing more dangerous than a woman who has reached her breaking point, because she has nothing left to lose. My husband thought he had won. My best friend thought she had replaced me. But little did they know, the woman they thought was broken was actually reborn that night. Not as a victim, not as a wife desperate for love, but as a storm, patient and silent, waiting for the perfect time to strike. And when I struck,
They would both learn that betrayal cuts deep, but revenge cuts deeper. Revenge without proof is just rage, and rage can be dismissed as hysteria, weakness, or emotion. But proof is undeniable. Proof is a weapon. Proof is power. And after reaching my breaking point, I knew I couldn't simply accuse him or confront her. They would twist it, deny it, and somehow make me look like the jealous, insecure wife. No, if I wanted to win, I needed evidence so sharp, so undeniable, that it would cut them both down where they stood. So I began my silent war. At first it felt strange, living with him, smiling across the dinner table, pretending everything was fine while inside I was quietly plotting. He thought he was safe because I wasn't screaming, because I wasn't throwing plates or storming out of the house. He mistook my calm for ignorance. That was his biggest mistake. I started with the phone. Every night when he fell asleep, I waited. I memorized the rhythm of his breathing, the way his chest rose and fell when he slipped into deep sleep. Then slowly, silently, I would slide his phone off the nightstand. My hands would shake, not from guilt, but from the adrenaline of knowing I was walking a razor's edge. One wrong move, one sudden stir from him, and the act would be exposed. But I was careful. I knew his passcode. Of course I did, though he thought he had hidden it from me. Years of marriage teach you more about a person than they realize, and once I was inside, I found treasure. Deleted messages, I recovered them. Call logs, screenshotted. Late night texts from her filled with emojis. Voice notes, where she whispered his name. Even hotel reservations. I saved it all. I created a secret folder on my laptop, backed it up on a hidden drive, and even printed some out. Every piece of evidence felt like a brick I was stacking, building the gallows where their lies would hang. But I didn't stop at the phone. No, I became more meticulous. I checked bank statements. Strange transactions started to stand out. Dinners at restaurants we had never gone to. Hotel bills, gifts that never made it to my hands. Each one was a thread, and as I pulled, the web of deceit grew clearer. And then there was her, my best friend, the woman who hugged me tight, who called me sister, who laughed in my face while stabbing me in the back. She had no idea that I was watching her every move now. When she came over, I paid attention to the little details. The perfume she wore that lingered in my husband's car, the way her phone buzzed the same time his did, the guilty flicker in her eyes when she caught me looking. One evening, when she excused herself to the bathroom during dinner at my house, I followed. I went into my bedroom, grabbed her bag, and checked, and there it was, his watch, the same watch he told me he had lost weeks ago. I took a picture and slipped it back in. My hands were steady this time, no hesitation, no fear, just icy resolve. But gathering evidence wasn't just about catching them red-handed. It was about timing. Revenge without timing is clumsy, and clumsy revenge backfires. So I waited. I cataloged everything. Dates, times, excuses. I created a timeline so tight, so irrefutable, that when I finally revealed it, there would be no escape. And in those weeks of silence, something interesting happened. The more I gathered, the calmer I became. The anger was still there, yes, but it was focused, controlled. I was no longer the broken wife crying into her pillow. I was the architect of their downfall. And every screenshot, every receipt, every whispered lie I caught was another tool in my arsenal. There's a strange empowerment in knowing the truth while your enemies still believe they're fooling you. He would kiss me goodbye, thinking he was leaving me in blissful ignorance, while I was already holding the evidence of his betrayal in my hands. She would smile at me sweetly, thinking I had no idea, while I was quietly documenting every betrayal she thought she had hid. Sometimes I almost laughed at the absurdity. They thought they were the clever ones, the manipulators, the masterminds, but the truth was, they were puppets, and I was pulling the strings without them even realizing. But here's the thing about gathering evidence. It's not just about proving their betrayal to others. It's about proving it to yourself. For so long I had doubted my instincts. I had let him gaslight me, convince me that I was paranoid, emotional, unstable. But every screenshot I saved, every receipt I photographed, every secret message I uncovered, was like a voice whispering, "You're not crazy. You were right all along." And that was powerful, because once a woman reclaims her truth, she becomes unstoppable. Still, I knew evidence alone wasn't enough. I needed to make sure that when I struck, it wasn't just a private confrontation. No, this had to be public. They had humiliated me in silence. I would humiliate them in the light of day. So I started planning how I would reveal it. I imagined the looks on their faces, the gasps of the people who thought we were the perfect couple, the shame that would stain their reputations forever. And that vision kept me going. Weeks turned into months, and by then I had everything I needed. Photos, messages, proof of financial betrayal, evidence so damning that neither of them could talk their way out of it. My arsenal was complete. But the sweetest part, they still didn't know. They still believed I was blind. They still laughed behind my back. Still thought they were in control. And that was the beauty of it. I wasn't going to just confront them. I was going to let them believe they were safe until the very last second, and then I would pull the ground out from beneath their feet. Gathering the evidence wasn't just about building a case. It was about building my strength, about transforming my silence into strategy, about turning betrayal into ammunition. And every piece I collected brought me one step closer to the day I would finally strike. And when that day came, their lies wouldn't just unravel, they would collapse.
There's an art to pretending you don't see what's happening right under your nose. It's a dangerous, delicate performance. Because if you stumble, you expose your pain. If you succeed, they walk into their own trap thinking they're invisible. I learned that art. I wore it like armor. At first glance, it looked like cowardice. Friends whispered that I was too passive, that I was letting him get away with everything. They didn't know the cost of jumping too soon. Confrontation without proof would have turned me into the hysterical wife, the jealous woman everyone would pity rather than believe. So I chose the harder path. I played blind, I played small, I smiled, I acted like nothing was wrong. Every performance requires preparation. I practiced the casual laugh, the distracted smile, the friendly touch that says everything's fine. When he walked in late, I would ask about his day and fold his shirt with the same tenderness I'd always had. When she called, I answered in the same warm voice I'd used for years. I didn't let my eyes linger. I didn't let my tone waver. I folded my rage into the neat calm of normalcy. People interpreted my silence as weakness. Many nights, alone, I felt the sting of that assumption. But silence was not surrender. Silence was strategy. The more convincingly I pretended to be blind, the more careless they became. They smiled louder when I was around, whispered younger, risked bolder moves because they believed me harmless. And that hubris was the blade I was sharpening. There is a skill to watching while smiling. I learned to read a mouth for the lie being shaped behind polite words. I learned to memorize the small tells, how his thumb lingered on certain messages, the micro expression that crossed her face when someone mentioned future plan. I listened to the cadence of their voices when they thought no one else was home. I watched their laughter and cataloged the moments where it wasn't meant for me. Every casual gesture, every inside joke I wasn't part of became a breadcrumb. I quietly collect. Pretending to be blind also meant controlling my own narrative. I posted the right pictures on social media, happy dinners, weekend brunches, family events in order to maintain the facade and to invite no suspicion. People would comment, "You two are goals," and it was like salt in a wound. But it also confirmed that the illusion worked. They performed for the audience. Little did they know I was the audience and the director both. The real cruelty of acting unaware is the way it forces you to swallow humiliation every single day. When he praised her in front of me, an innocent compliment about her laugh, a compliment about her help on some project, my throat closed and a coldness spread through me. The urge to expose them was raw. I wanted to stand up and say, "You called her last night at 2 a.m. You promised her things." But I didn't. I smiled, reached for the wine, and learned how to breathe through the betrayal. Each swallowed scream made me stronger in a strange, terrible way. There were practical reasons for the performance as well. If I played the accused too soon, they would destroy evidence. If I confronted them publicly without the receipts, they'd spin a tale of my instability. So every time their arrogance grew, I stayed calm. When he flirted openly at a party and she sent me a selfie of them laughing, I posted a group photo and wrote something harmless. I let the world see what I wanted them to see, the woman who forgave, who was above drama. It made the moment of exposure all the more catastrophic for them later. Pretending to be blind required boundaries too. I learned not to pry where prying would alert them. I didn't become reckless. I let them believe their secrecy was secure as I quietly moved pieces from their hands into mine. I watched their routines and slipped into the spaces they left unguarded. He would text her from a work account. I would screenshot. She would hide a receipt in a drawer. I would find it when she left. The more they believed in my ignorance, the more careless they became, sending me exactly what I needed to end them. There's a psychological edge to the performance that most people never see. When someone betrays you, they're not just breaking a promise, they're trying to rob you of your identity. They want to make you doubt your instincts, make you feel small. By pretending not to see, I reclaimed a different kind of power. The power to observe without reaction, to hold my truth so close that no one could take it. The performance made me a quiet judge, measuring their sins one by one. And then there's the social armor. When friends asked, "Are you okay?" I answered with platitudes and kept invitations to expensive dinners. I wanted no pity that would dilute the humiliation of the reveal. Sympathy before the truth ruined the moment. They would rally around him, call me dramatic. So I kept my smile polished, my voice warm, my calendar full of events that supported the image of a family still intact. But acting blind took a toll. Some nights I woke with my heart pounding, the old instinct to scream and demand answers returning like a tide. I fought the impulse to slip, to look at his screen, to confront her online. Each time I held back, I felt like I was sharpening a blade that would one day be gleaming in the light. Restraint became my discipline, patience my ally. The real turning point in this performance came unexpected. They became so convinced of their secrecy that they stopped checking their own privacy. They left messages open, conversations on display, obvious clues in the places they thought only they frequented. One evening he bragged about a future plan in front of a neighbor, assuming I didn't care. He spoke too loud, his words unguarded. The neighbor repeated the story at a barbecue, unaware the woman standing beside him heard everything. Sometimes pretending to be blind meant letting the world feed you the rope that would hang them. By the time I was ready to act,
The evidence had piled itself up like a confession they had written with their own hands. My performance had turned them into authors of their downfall. They had painted their crime in broad strokes, convinced their masterpiece would be admired. Instead, it became the mural that would expose them. There is a final cruelty to pretending not to see. It makes the reveal sweet. When you watch someone who assumed your ignorance crumble in front of an audience that once applauded them, there is a visceral satisfaction that has nothing to do with malice and everything to do with justice. The mask falls and the truth hits with the force of a storm. Pretending to be blind is not for the faint of heart. It requires courage to hold your truth in silence, cunning to collect the necessary proof, and discipline to maintain the act while your world burns inside. It is lonely work, it is precise work, but it is powerful work, because in the end what they thought was my weakness, my silence, my smiles, my apparent blindness, was the very thing that led them to their ruin. They laughed, they loved, they plotted, believing I was a ghost in my own life. They were wrong. I was not blind. I was watching, waiting. And when the time came, I opened my eyes and the world changed. Every hunter knows you don't chase your prey. You let it come to you. You study its patterns, anticipate its moves, and then when it feels safest, you strike. My husband and my so-called best friend thought they were hunters. They believed they were outsmarting me, weaving their secret romance under my nose. But the truth, they were prey. They were walking willingly into the trap I had built for them. The idea for the trap came to me one evening when I overheard a phone call. He was in his office, door slightly ajar, whispering in a tone that used to be reserved for me. His words were soft but clear. "I'll see you this weekend. I can't wait to finally have some time alone." My chest tightened. I didn't need to guess who he was talking to. I already knew. That weekend getaway was their dream escape, their private paradise away from the woman they thought was too naive to suspect. But what they didn't realize was that this weekend would become their nightmare. I started preparing immediately. Step 1, secure my future. I transferred our joint savings into an account only I could access. Quietly, legally, strategic. I gathered documents, our house papers, investments, everything he thought he controlled. If he tried to leave me for her, he'd be leaving empty-handed. My silence wasn't just emotional, it was financial armor. Step 2, fortify the evidence. I compiled everything I had gathered, the texts, the photos, the receipts, into a timeline that painted the entire story. I wasn't just going to accuse them, I was going to prove it, detail by detail, until there was no room left for denial. I printed copies, backed them up, and locked them away. My arsenal was untouchable. Step 3, the stage. Revenge is most powerful when it's public. They betrayed me in whispers, in shadows, in stolen moments. I would expose them in the light. So I planned a dinner, a celebration. I invited family, friends, people who believed in our perfect marriage. I told everyone I had a surprise for my husband, something unforgettable. And it would be unforgettable, just not in the way he imagined. But here's the art of building a trap. You must play your role flawlessly until the very last second. I became sweeter than ever. I kissed him goodbye, wished him fun on his work trip, and even texted my best friend cheerful emojis, pretending I had no clue she was about to share a hotel room with my husband. They thought they had fooled me. In reality, I was leading them into the center of my plan. There were moments I almost broke. The night before their trip, she came over, all smiles and laughter, pretending to be the friend I once loved. She even hugged me, and as her arms wrapped around me, I wanted to scream in her ear, "I know everything, I know what you've done." But instead I hugged her back, smiled, and said, "Have a great weekend." My voice didn't tremble. That was my victory. On the day of their getaway, I kissed him on the cheek as he walked out the door, suitcase in hand. "Don't work too hard," I teased. He laughed, smug and confident, certain he had me wrapped around his finger. He didn't know that while he drove off to meet her, I was setting the stage for his downfall. That evening, my house was filled with people, friends, relatives, colleagues. The air buzzed with curiosity. Everyone thought I was about to announce something beautiful, maybe even a renewal of vows. They smiled, raised glasses, and whispered about how lucky I was. I let them. The sweeter the illusion, the sharper the shock. When the time came, I stood in front of everyone, my hands steady, my heart a drum inside my chest. Tonight, I said, I want to share something very important, something that shows the truth of my marriage. The room fell silent. Faces leaned forward, and then, with one click, the projector lit up. Screenshots appeared. His messages to her selfies sent to him, receipts for their secret dinners, voice notes full of promises. One by one, like chapters in a book, I revealed their story. Gasps echoed, murmurs rose. My husband's colleagues exchanged shocked glances. My best friend's reputation crumbled before she even walked into the room. By the time the final image flashed, a hotel reservation in both their names, the room was thick with silence. No one could deny it. No one could save them. The trap had snapped shut. And here's the thing. He wasn't even there to defend himself. He was still in that hotel room with her. Probably laughing. Probably thinking he was untouchable. When he returned, the wreckage would already be waiting. His world would already be at. The trap was not just about exposure. It was about control. I controlled the narrative, the timing, the audience. They didn't get to explain. They didn't get to twist the story. By the time they realized what had happened, their reputations were destroyed, their relationships severed, their names tainted. But the sweetest part, I didn't raise my voice once. I didn't throw a single plate. I didn't look like the crazy wife scorned. I stood there, calm and dignified, as if I had simply revealed the weather forecast. My silence in the weeks leading up to this moment had been mistaken for weakness, but now it was undeniable strength. That's the thing about the perfect trap. It doesn't just catch your enemies. It reveals who they truly are when the mask falls. My husband, the perfect man, was exposed as a liar. My best friend, the loyal sister, was revealed as a snake. And me, the woman they underestimated. I was no longer the victim. I was the executioner. When they finally returned, faces pale, phones buzzing with messages from everyone who had been at the dinner, they realized their empire had collapsed. Friends stopped answering. Family refused to speak to them. Jobs grew distant. They thought they were escaping into a new life together. But what they walked into was the smoldering ruin of the one they destroyed. The perfect trap is not about anger. It's about patience. It's about making them so comfortable, so certain of their victory, that they walk willingly into the jaws of their own destruction. They betrayed me thinking I was blind, but in the end I was the one who had seen everything. And when the trap finally closed, it wasn't just revenge, it was justice. There are moments in life when time slows down, when every detail sharpens the clink of glasses, the whisper of conversations, the nervous hum in the air. That night, my home wasn't just filled with family and friends, it was filled with expectation. They thought I had prepared something beautiful, a celebration, maybe even a grand gesture of love for my husband. I let them think that, because the sweeter the illusion, the more devastating the truth. The dining room glowed with warm lights, candles flickering on polished tables, wine glasses shimmering. People laughed, clapped each other on the back, asked about vacations and children. On the surface, it was a scene of harmony, but in my chest, my heart beat like a war drum. Every second that passed was a countdown to detonation. I stood at the head of the table, forcing my smile to match the room's cheer. Inside, I was steel. I had rehearsed this moment in my mind 1,000 times. The speeches, the reveal, the silence that would follow. It played like a film reel that I had directed. Tonight wasn't about rage. It was about precision. When the last guest had settled, I tapped my glass with a spoon. The chatter died down. Dozens of eyes turned toward me, faces glowing with curiosity, some leaning forward, eager for what they assumed would be a heartfelt announcement. I drew a deep breath and let the room fall into silence. "I've gathered you all tonight," I began, my voice calm, steady, deliberate, because I wanted to share something important about my marriage, something real. Smiles spread. Someone whispered, "She's going to say she's pregnant." Another murmured, "Maybe a vow renewal." I let the assumptions swirl. Then with one click of the remote in my hand, the room changed forever. The projector behind me lit up the wall with the first slide, a screenshot of a message, his name, her name, words dripping with desire. A gasp rippled across the room. Whispers grew louder. Someone dropped their fork. Click. Another screenshot. Plans for secret dinners. Click. A receipt for a hotel room. Click. A photo she had sent him. Provocative. Undeniable. Gasps turned to sharp intakes of breath. Eyes darted across the table, seeking his face, her face, but neither of them were there yet. I continued. Each click, a dagger. Voice notes where they laughed, called each other nicknames, whispered promises of a future together. The evidence rolled on like a storm, each slide stripping away the carefully crafted illusion of our perfect marriage. By the time I revealed the final image, their names printed together on a weekend getaway reservation, the room was suffocating in silence. You could hear the electricity in the air, the disbelief, the betrayal that radiated not just from me but from every single person who had once admired us. I turned, finally, to face them. "This," I said softly, "is the truth of the man you all thought was perfect, and the woman I thought was my sister." Murmurs erupted. A cousin whispered, "I can't believe it." An aunt shook her head, muttering, "How could she?" My husband's colleague excused himself from the table, muttering something about professionalism and integrity. In that moment I didn't feel rage. I didn't feel heartbreak. I felt something far more powerful. Release. The burden I had carried in silence was no longer mine. The world had seen it. The truth was no longer locked inside me. It was out. Raw, undeniable, irreversible. And then came the fallout. Phones buzzed. Messages spread like wildfire. By the time my husband and best friend returned from their little getaway, the news had already outrun them. Their reputations were shattered before they even walked through the door. The family that once praised him avoided his calls. Friends who had adored her unfollowed her, blocked her, erased her from their lives. The community that once looked up to us as couple goals now whispered a different story, one of lies, deceit, and betrayal. When he finally stormed into the house, face pale, voice trembling with anger, he shouted, "How could you embarrass me like this?" In front of everyone, I looked at him, calm as ever, and answered, "How could you embarrass me like this?" In front of the world. He had no words. He tried to paint me as vindictive, as manipulative, as cruel, but how could lies stand against the mountain of truth I had shown? Every excuse died on his lips, because the evidence had already condemned him. And her, my best friend, she didn't even try to deny it. When people cornered her with questions, she crumbled. "We didn't mean for it to happen," she sobbed. "It just did." But betrayal doesn't just happen. It's chosen, nurtured, fed with lies and secrecy, and no one in that room was foolish enough to believe otherwise. The beauty of public exposure isn't just in the humiliation, it's in the justice. For months, I had been gaslighted, made to feel paranoid, unstable, foolish. But now the truth was undeniable. I wasn't the crazy wife. I wasn't the insecure friend. I was the woman who stood in the light and revealed what others tried to bury in the dark. That night, after everyone left, the house was silent, except for the faint ticking of the clock. He sat slumped in the chair, defeated, his mask shattered. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I simply placed the divorce papers in front of him and said, "Sign." He looked up, disbelief etched on his face. "You're really ending this? After everything we've been through?" I leaned closer, my voice steady, and whispered, "After everything you put me through." And in that moment, I realized something vital. Betrayal might break your heart, but truth sets you free. Public exposure wasn't just about punishing them. It was about liberating me. I walked away lighter, freer, stronger than I had ever been. Because sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't what you do in anger. It's what you reveal in silence. Some wars are fought with guns, others with silence. Mine ended with a stack of papers placed neatly on the dining table. Divorce paper, plain white sheets. But to me they were sharper than any blade, heavier than any weapon. They weren't just documents. They were the embodiment of justice, the final chapter of a story he thought he was writing but I had already authored. The night of the public exposure had left my husband pale, hollow-eyed, and defeated. He had spent hours pacing, mumbling excuses, trying to stitch together a defense no one would buy. When the last guest had gone, when the house had fallen into silence, he collapsed into a chair and buried his face in his hands. For a moment he looked less like the charming man everyone admired, and more like a boy caught stealing from the cookie jar. But this wasn't about cookies. It was about years of lies, betrayal and humiliation. I watched him in silence, not with pity, not with love, but with clarity. I had given him everything, my loyalty, my patience, my trust, and he had thrown it away for cheap thrills and empty promises. Betrayal has a way of stripping away illusions. The man I had once called my soulmate was nothing more than a stranger wearing a mask, and I was done begging that stranger to love me. The next morning, I placed the papers in front of him. No raised voice, no tears, no drama, just the quiet finality of ink and signature lines. "Sign them," I said. My voice was steady, calm, like I was asking him to pass the salt at dinner. His head shot up. "You're serious?" I met his eyes, dead serious. He tried to laugh it off at first. "Come on, you don't really want this. You're just upset. We can fix it. We'll go to counseling. I'll apologize." But the words sounded pathetic, hollow, rehearsed, like lines from a bad play he'd been forced to perform. I let him ramble, let him weave his weak fabric of excuses, and then I cut through it with one sentence. "I'm not interested in fixing what you destroyed. I'm interested in finishing it." His smile faltered. Anger replaced his faux sincerity. "So what, you're just going to throw everything away? Our life, our family, our home?" That was the moment I realized how little he understood. I wasn't throwing anything away. He had already done that. I was simply walking away from the ruins he had created. I leaned forward, slid the pen across the table, and whispered, "You don't get to keep me as your consolation prize. You don't get to humiliate me in private and parade me in public. You don't get me at all." He didn't touch the pen. He clenched his fists instead. "You're going to regret this," he spat. "You can't survive without me." Ah, the arrogance of a man who thinks he is the sun around which you orbit. He had forgotten that before him I lived, during him I endured, and after him I would rot. I didn't need his money, his approval, or his name. What I needed was freedom, and those papers were my key. In the days that followed, the battle grew nastier. He tried bargaining, flowers, apologies, desperate late-night talk. When that failed, he tried threats, claiming he'd take the house, the savings, everything we had built together. He underestimated me yet again. What he didn't know was that long before exposure night, I had secured my position. The accounts were already transferred, the assets already in my name, the legal groundwork already laid. Every move he tried to make bounced off the fortress I had quietly built while he thought I was blind. The look on his face when he realized he had nothing left, that was sweeter than any revenge. He had gambled my love for her flattery, and in the end, he lost both. My best friend, if I can even call her that, tried reaching out too. Tears, apologies, pleas for forgiveness. We didn't mean for it to happen, she cried over the phone. It just did. But betrayal doesn't just happen. You don't trip and fall into an affair. You choose it, you nurture it, you protect it, with lies and forgiveness. While noble does not mean reconciliation, I forgave her in my heart, to free myself from her shadow. But I never let her back in. She became a ghost to me, a warning etched in memory. When the divorce was finalized, people asked me if I felt sad, if I mourned the end of the marriage. And yes, there was grief, not for him, not for her, but for the woman I used to be. The one who believed in fairy tales, in happy endings, in loyalty without question. That woman was gone, but in her place stood someone stronger, someone who understood that love should never come at the cost of dignity, and trust should never mean blindness. The papers were more than a legal severing, they were symbolic. Each signature was a reclamation of my worth, a declaration that I refused to be diminished. They said, I choose myself, I choose freedom, I choose truth. And as I walked out of that courthouse, papers in hand, sunlight spilling across my face, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. The kind of peace that comes when you no longer carry the weight of lies, when you no longer beg for love from someone incapable of giving it. I didn't look back, I didn't need to, because the sweetest revenge isn't screaming, or begging, or clinging. It's walking away with your head high, while the ones who betrayed you are left drowning in the wreckage of their own choices. And that's what those divorce papers were to me, not just an ending, a beginning.
Betrayal is never just a private act. It ripples outward, touching everyone connected to you. At first, the pain feels like yours alone. Raw, intimate, suffocating. But once the truth is exposed, once the lies are dragged into the light, betrayal no longer belongs only to the betrayed. It becomes public property. And when it does, the betrayer is no longer the charmer, no longer the golden child, no longer the admired friend. They become what they truly are, an outcast. It happens slowly, then all at once. The night of the public exposure, people gasped, whispered, avoided eye contact. By the next morning, phones had been buzzing non-stop. Screenshots were forwarded, whispers carried across friend circles, relatives, colleagues. You can't contain a scandal like this. It grows legs, it multiplies, it spreads like wildfire. My husband and my best friend thought they had built a private paradise for themselves. What they didn't realize was that I had lit a match, and now their secret paradise was burning in front of everyone they had ever known. First came the silence. You know the kind, the one that speaks louder than words. Friends stopped calling. Invitations disappeared. Messages left unread. The people who used to crowd around them, laughing at his jokes, complimenting her charm, suddenly kept their distance. Betrayers never understand this part. They believe their charisma is unshakable. their image indestructible. But people don't like standing too close to fire. They're afraid of being burned too. Then came the judgments, harsh, merciless, whispered behind closed doors, but no less cutting. How could she do that to her best friend? How could he betray his wife like that? If they lied about this, what else are they capable of? Human beings love stories, and betrayal stories spread like storms. They became the cautionary tale, the example people used when warning others about loyalty and trust. His colleagues were the first to turn. The office where he once strutted with pride now became a place of shame. He lost clients, lost respect. No one wanted to trust their business to a man who couldn't even honor his vows. Professional betrayal and personal betrayal are cousins. They bleed into each other, and soon his career, the one thing he thought was untouchable, began to crumble. My so-called best friend didn't fare better. Her fiancé dumped her without a second thought. Her family, once so proud of her, cut ties. "We didn't raise you to be like this," her mother reportedly said. She was no longer invited to weddings, dinners, gatherings. She became the subject of whispers in grocery stores, the awkward silence when her name was mentioned. The girl who once thrived in the warmth of friendships now walked through cold stares and averted eyes. And me? I didn't lift a finger. I didn't have to. Karma was doing the work for me. That's the beauty of truth. It doesn't need an advocate once it's exposed. It speaks for itself. People may argue with accusations, but they cannot argue with proof. And I had shown proof. Screenshots, receipts, photos, their own words, their own actions. The world didn't need me to explain further. The world judged them on its own. The isolation grew heavier by the week. At first, they clung to each other, united by desperation. They told themselves the world didn't matter, that they only needed each other. But betrayal doesn't build strong foundations. It builds cracks. Soon, the pressure of being outcast weighed on them. He resented her for being the reason he lost everything. She resented him for not being able to protect her from the fallout. What began as passion quickly soured into blame. I watched from a distance, not with glee, but with a cold sense of justice. They had stolen from me my trust, my love, my dignity, and in return, life had stolen from them the very things they valued most: reputation, respect, belonging. They had each other, yes. But what good is love when it's rotting under the weight of guilt and shame? It wasn't just about social exile, though. It was about the shift in power. For years, he had carried himself as though I was lucky to be with him. For years, she had pretended to be the loyal friend who secretly thought she was better. But now, the script had flipped. I walked through rooms with my head high, shoulders squared, dignity intact. They, on the other hand, couldn't even look people in the eye. I didn't have to raise my voice. My silence, my calm, became their loudest humiliation. The outcast's life is not dramatic. It's quiet. That's the irony. They don't get chased by mobs with torches. They simply fade. Invitations stop. Opportunities vanish. Friends become strangers. Slowly, steadily, they dissolve from the center of the story into the margins. And that is exactly what happened to them. He, once the perfect husband, was now the man whispered about at community events. That's him, the one who cheated. She, once the loyal friend, was now reduced to a label. People spat out with disgust. The homewrecker. They became shadows of themselves, remembered not for their achievements, but for their betrayal. Sometimes I still saw glimpses of them at the grocery store, passing by in the street. They looked smaller somehow, like their own bodies carried the weight of their disgrace. And every time our eyes met, I saw the same flicker of regret.
the same silent plea for understanding, but I gave them nothing. No anger, no forgiveness, no acknowledgement. Just the cold indifference of someone who has outgrown the need for revenge. Because karma had already finished the job. The betrayer always thinks they'll walk away victorious, holding hands laughing at the one they left behind. But what they never calculate is the cost of betrayal once it leaves the private and becomes public. They don't just lose the person they betrayed, they lose everyone. Trust, once broken, doesn't just belong to one relationship. It echoes. And no one wants to stand beside a liar when the truth has already stained their hands. And so as the weeks turned to months, they shrank. I rose. They whispered. I walked tall. They begged for second chances with others. I built a new life with no need for theirs. That was the sweetest part of it all. Not the pain I inflicted, but the pain they inflicted on themselves, revealed, amplified and reflected back to them by the society they thought would always embrace them. The betrayer had become the outcast, and I, once the victim, had become untouchable. Not all victories are loud. Some aren't paraded in front of crowds or shouted from rooftops, or carved into medals. Some victories are quiet, so quiet that only you can hear them, feel them, taste them. My victory was silent, but it was sweeter than anything I could have screamed in anger. After the divorce was finalized, after the exposure had run its course, after the betrayers had shrunk into shadows, I found myself standing in front of a mirror one morning. I studied my reflection. My face looked the same eyes, the same lips, the same hair, but something was different. My gaze was steadier, my shoulders straighter, my spirit lighter. For the first time in years, I saw a woman who wasn't defined by her husband's actions or her friend's betrayal. I saw me. That was my silent victory. It wasn't just about walking away with the house, the assets or the reputation intact. It wasn't about watching them crumble. My real triumph was that I had not let them destroy me. They had tried in their own way to reduce me to ashes, to make me doubt myself, to make me small, to make me desperate. But instead I had risen from their betrayal sharper, stronger, freer. In the weeks that followed, people kept asking me, how do you feel now that they've lost everything? They expected gloating, bitterness, satisfaction dripping from my words. But I didn't feel the need to rub salt in wounds. My silence was enough. My indifference was enough. Do you know why? Because true victory doesn't require applause. It doesn't need witnesses. It simply is. Every time I ignored his desperate calls, that was victory. Every time I saw her name pop up in mutual conversations and chose not to react, that was victory. Every time I walked into a room with dignity while they shrank in the corners, that was victory. Because here's the truth. Revenge doesn't always mean burning others to the ground. Sometimes it means standing tall in your own fireproof skin while those who betrayed you suffocate in the smoke of their own choices. My silent victory was also in the small moments. Moments no one else could see but me. The mornings when I woke up without anxiety tightening my chest. The evenings when I cooked for myself. Not out of duty, but out of joy. The freedom of not checking a phone for hidden messages, of not second-guessing every word, of not living under the weight of suspicion. Peace became my victory, and peace is louder than any scream. And then there was the dignity. Oh, the dignity. In a world where anger is expected, where broken women are supposed to cry, scream, break dishes, I didn't give them that satisfaction. I didn't let them see me unravel. I didn't let them use my pain against me. I stayed calm, composed, strategic. That calmness became my crown, and I wore it with pride. That calmness is what haunted them most. He told me once during one of his desperate calls, "I could handle your anger, but your silence, it kills me." Exactly. Because silence has power. Silence speaks of control. Silence means you are no longer chained to the chaos they tried to bind you in. I realized something profound. My victory was never really about him or her. They were just characters in a painful chapter of my life. My true victory was with myself. It was proving to myself that I could endure heartbreak, betrayal, humiliation, and still stand taller than before. It was proving that love, when corrupted, doesn't define your worth. That dignity, when guarded, is stronger than betrayal. And the sweetest part, I didn't need revenge to taste like fire. It tasted like stillness, like peace, like freedom. Sometimes I'd see him from a distance at the store, in passing, on rare occasions where paths crossed. His eyes were hollow, his charm gone. He'd look at me with regret, maybe even longing, as if he finally understood what he had lost. And in those moments I didn't gloat, I didn't smirk, I didn't whisper, "I told you so." I simply turned away, head high, without a word. That silence cut deeper than any insult could, because silence said, "You are nothing to me now." And her, she became a ghost in social circles. Once adored, now shunned. Sometimes she tried to catch my eye, as if begging for acknowledgement, forgiveness, any sign that she still mattered. But I gave her nothing, because she didn't deserve even the energy of my anger. That too was victory. I came to understand something life-changing. True revenge isn't about making others bleed. It's about healing your own wounds, so completely that their betrayal can no longer touch. True victory isn't about destroying them. It's about rebuilding yourself so powerfully that their destruction becomes irrelevant. In my silence, I created a new life. I invested in myself, my health, my passions, my dreams. I spent time with people who loved me without condition. I filled my home with laughter again, not with suspicion. And every step I took toward that new life was a quiet declaration of victory. Betrayal had tried to chain me. Silence had freed me. And now I walked untethered. People often imagine revenge as a loud, fiery explosion. But mine was a steady, rising tide that washed over everything they had done and left me standing alone on solid ground. The tide drowned them, but it lifted me. So when I say my silent victory, I don't mean whispers of vengeance or hidden spite. I mean the calm strength of knowing I survived. I outlasted. I reclaimed myself. That is the kind of victory that doesn't fade. And in the end, that was the greatest revenge of all. I didn't just survive them, I thrived beyond them. There is a moment in every storm when the thunder fades, the rain slows, and the sky begins to break open. The world is still wet, the ground still heavy, but something new is waiting to emerge. That's what transformation feels like. It doesn't happen in a single day, or a single grand gesture. It happens slowly, quietly, like a seed breaking through the soil after being buried in darkness. When my marriage collapsed, when my best friend's betrayal was exposed, people thought the story ended there. She got her revenge, they said. She walked away victorious. But the truth is, revenge wasn't the end of my story. It was the catalyst. The real story was what came after the transformation. At first, the silence was strange. I had grown so accustomed to chaos, the constant anxiety of late nights, the suspicious text messages, the forced smiles, that when it was gone, the quiet felt unnatural. I would wake up in the middle of the night expecting the sting of betrayal to pierce me again. But instead there was nothing, just stillness. And in that stillness I began to rediscover myself. Transformation begins with small choices, simple, almost invisible ones. Cooking dinner not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Taking long walks without worrying about when he'd come home. Filling my house with music, with candles, with colors that made me feel alive again. For the first time in years I asked myself, what do I want? Not what does he want? Not what do people expect? But what do I want? That question was the key that unlocked everything. I started dressing differently, not to impress anyone, not to fill an empty space he left, but to reflect myself. Clothes that felt bold, jewelry that made me feel powerful. I looked in the mirror and saw not a broken wife, but a woman reclaiming her identity. Every choice was an act of defiance against the version of me they had tried to create. Silent, insecure, dependent. The transformation wasn't just external, it was deeply internal. Betrayal had left scars, yes, but it had also burned away illusion. I no longer believed in perfect marriages, in blind trust, in fairy tales written by someone else. I believed in myself. I believed in boundaries, in dignity, in the strength that comes from standing alone. And that belief was like oxygen in my lungs. I invested in myself in ways I had neglected. I returned to hobbies I had abandoned. I signed up for classes, reconnected with passions, rebuilt friendships that were genuine, not poisoned by deceit. Every time I did something for me, I felt another chain break. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving. And here's the most profound truth I learned. Transformation is not about becoming someone new. It's about returning to the person you were always meant to be. Before the lies, before the manipulation, before the betrayal. I remembered the girl I used to be. Confident, joyful, full of dreams, and I welcomed her back. Only now she was stronger, wiser, untouchable. There were moments when the betrayers tried to creep back into my life. He would send messages, sometimes bitter, sometimes regretful. I made a mistake, he'd write. Can we talk? She too reached out once, her voice shaky with guilt. But my transformation meant I no longer needed their apologies. Their words had no power over me. I didn't block them out of anger. I simply ignored them out of irrelevance. That was the clearest sign of change, when the things that once shattered me no longer had the ability to touch me. Transformation also reshaped how I saw relationships. I no longer viewed love as something to beg for, or sacrifice myself to keep. I understood now that love is not about possession or performance. It's about partnership, honesty, and respect. If I were ever to love again, it would not be because I needed someone. It would be because I chose someone who added to my life, not drained it. That shift, knowing I was enough on my own, was the greatest transformation of all. People who saw me after months often remarked, "You look different." And it wasn't just the clothes or the smile or the lighter energy. It was the aura, the unspoken strength of someone who had walked through fire and come out not burned but forged. That's what transformation does. It turns wounds into wisdom, pain into power, heartbreak into healing. One day I walked past my ex-husband and my former best friend in the street. They looked older, heavier, worn down by their choices. Their eyes darted toward me, searching for bitterness, for pain, for any sign that I still carried their betrayal. But all they saw was peace, and that peace crushed them more than any insult could. That moment crystallized everything. I had transformed. They hadn't. They were still stuck in the cycle of lies and regret, while I had stepped into a new life. And perhaps the most surprising part, I was grateful, not for them, not for what they did, but for what their betrayal forced me to discover. Without their cruelty, I may never have broken free of the illusion. I may never have learned the depth of my own strength. Sometimes, the ugliest endings are the most powerful beginning. The transformation wasn't just about me. It rippled outward. Friends told me I inspired them. Women whispered to me, if you could walk away with your dignity, maybe I can too. My story became more than revenge. It became a roadmap for others. Proof that you can be broken and still rise. That betrayal doesn't define your worth. That silence and dignity are louder than rage. So when I say the transformation, I don't just mean a change in appearance or circumstance. I mean a rebirth. I mean a woman who walked into the fire of betrayal, stood in the ashes of her old life, and built something greater from the ground up. And that, perhaps, is the ultimate revenge. Not screaming, not gloating, not clinging to the past, but thriving so fully in the present that the past can no longer touch you. That is my transformation, and it is the legacy of every woman who refuses to let betrayal break her. Every story needs an ending, but endings are rarely neat. They are not always tied with ribbons, not always triumphant shouts echoing into the night. Sometimes, the ending is quiet, a door softly closing, a silence that speaks louder than any scream. And that's what my journey became. Not just a revenge story, not just an escape, but a final confession about what betrayal and vengeance truly taught me. I'll be honest, there were nights I imagined different endings, nights when anger kept me awake, and I pictured him on his knees, begging for forgiveness he would never get. Nights when I dreamed of her publicly humiliated, abandoned by everyone she once charmed. And yes, some of those things came true in their own way. Karma has a rhythm. It might move slowly, but it never misses its. But here is my confession. Even when I got my revenge, even when the world saw their masks fall, even when I walked away with dignity intact, I realized something profound. Revenge wasn't the point. Freedom was. Because the truth about revenge is this. It doesn't heal you. It doesn't rebuild you. It doesn't fill the void they created. What it does is balance the scales. It makes sure they feel what they made you feel. And yes, that has its sweetness. Watching them stumble, watching their world collapse, watching their laughter die in their throats. There's a satisfaction in that. But the deeper victory, the one that lasts, that comes from moving on. My husband even now sometimes sends messages, little apologies that arrive in my inbox like ghosts. I was a fool. I miss you. Can we meet? Every time I see them, I don't feel anger. I don't even feel love. I feel nothing. And that nothing is powerful, because once upon a time, his words were everything. They could light up my world or shatter it. Now they are meaningless pixels on a screen. My best friend tried too. One day she called, her voice shaky, her words tumbling out inside. Please forgive me. I don't know what I was thinking. I lost everything, and maybe once I would have shouted, cursed, demanded answers. But this time I didn't. I listened quietly, then hung up without a word. Because forgiveness is not always about letting them back in. Sometimes forgiveness is simply setting yourself free from the need for revenge. And I was already free. Here's my final confession. I don't regret what I did. I don't regret the exposure, the divorce, the silence, the trap, the evidence. I don't regret making them face the weight of their choices. Because if I hadn't, they might have walked away thinking betrayal has no consequences. But I also know this. If I had let revenge consume me, if I had built my whole life around their downfall, then they would have won twice. Once by betraying me, and again by chaining me to their memory. Instead, I chose a different ending, one where I let go. The sweetest revenge isn't destruction, it's evolution. It's looking at the person who tried to break you, and realizing they no longer have the power to touch you. It's walking into a new life so radiant that their shadow can't even reach your feet. My final confession is this: I am not the same woman who once wept in bed, clutching a phone with trembling hands, as she read messages that broke her world. I am not the same wife who smiled through pain at dinner parties, pretending everything was fine. I am not the same friend who trusted blindly, who gave loyalty without question. I am different now, stronger, clearer, untouchable, and perhaps strangely I am grateful. Grateful not for the betrayal itself. It was cruel, it was devastating, but for what it revealed. It showed me the cracks in my marriage, the illusions in my friendships, the strength I never knew I had. Without their betrayal, I might have lived my whole life in blindness, smiling at lies, mistaking manipulation for love. They freed me, even if that was never their intention. So here is the truth I whisper in this final confession. Betrayal is not the end. Revenge is not the end. The end is transformation. The end is healing. The end is becoming so much more than what they tried to reduce you to. And when I think of him now, when I think of her, I don't feel hatred. I feel distance, like remembering a dream that once terrified me, but now seems so far away, it almost feels unreal. That distance is my victory. That silence is my closure. Because the final confession of a betrayed woman is not I got revenge. It's not even I destroyed them. It's this: I rose, I healed, I chose myself, and that was the greatest revenge of all.